We shall now pause for station identification. You're listening to radio station DRBY. All the best information you can receive from a weird guy in a cape and mask broadcasting out of his basement. Recently, it came to my attention that the crew of the airship the Mensa has been tuning into my show and using it as a means to keep their youngest members entertained during their highly steampunk-rich regular meetings. I'm very flattered by this news, but I also feel a little regret. I had no idea I was speaking to an audience that was so young. So I intend to make up for that little oversight with today's episode by reading a story out of a children's book that I greatly enjoyed as a little derby. I still have my copy from when I was about 5 years old. But after doing a quick internet search, I learned that it went out of print around 1850, when I was officially too old to care. But I digress. This is the story of Larry the Least Weasel. Once upon a time, there was a weasel by the name of Larry. He was a happy weasel, skipping across the meadow in the bright summer sunshine, collecting small round rocks, and just generally being happy to be alive. As full as his happy little heart was, he did have one problem. All the other weasels in his weasel pack liked to make fun of him for being so small. "He's barely a wisp of a weasel," said a marvelous marten. "He may as well be a field mouse," said one overly excitable stoat. "Why, he's the least weasel of us all," an overly authoritative otter declared. They teased and teased, until Larry could no longer take the torment. He moved away from the weasel pack to make home for himself in a comparatively tall tree stump. There he worked on ways to grow bigger to become a more acceptable member of his pack. He tried putting lifts in his shoes. And he tried wearing a large pumpkin on his shoulders, which doesn't make any sense when you think about it, but hey, it happened. Then one day, as it often happened in the very old days, a vicious one-eyed ogre wandered toward the Weasley woods, possessing a mad craving for wild mustelidae. That's the scientific classification for weasels, kids. He traveled through the long winding mountains, the great rushing rivers, and the heavily populated suburbs. And after the long trip, he stopped to sit on the comparatively large tree stump so he could rest and pick the city limit signs out from between his toes. Now Larry, annoyed that someone's especially large hindquarters was severely warping the roof of his house, walked out to confront the massive ogre. "See here, you being of impossibly large posterior, find some other place to rest that cantankerous tushy of yours." The ogre, delighted to find the snack food of his dreams, lowered his head to Larry's gaze and bellowed, "Fee, fi, fo, fe! I smell the blood of Mustelidae." I think I'm beginning to see why this book was discontinued. Anyway, the ogre took one sniff at Larry, snorted, and said, "You art an especially tiny weasel. You are so small you'd probably just get stuck in my teeth if I ate you." "You're absolutely right, mighty ogre," Larry said with a sigh. "I am the least weasel in all these weaselly woods. I'm not even good enough to be an appetizer. But I do know where you can find the biggest, fattest, juiciest weasel in all the land." The ogre, not being especially intelligent for a creature of his skull diameter, replied with a hearty, "Yeah, okay, but you better not be double-crossing me, or I will crunch your bones and then use your fur as a pocket square." Larry perched on the ogre's forehead, and pointed his long weasel nose like a compass. He led the ogre up a massive hill, where there sat a giant rocky cave. Larry leaned down at the ogre and whispered, "Just inside that cave you'll find a great big, giant, juicy badger. He'll surely satisfy your massive ogre hunger, but I have to warn you, there is a certain thing you need to do in order to trap it." What do I need to do?" the ogre asked, licking his lips in anticipation. "Well, first you need to be blindfolded," Larry said, producing a blindfold and tying it over the ogre's one eye. "Now you must take this stick and walk in the cave. Once you find something fuzzy, all you have to do is poke it with the stick over and over while saying, 'I taste like honey and salmon.' You got all that?" The ogre nodded excitedly, and Larry hopped off his shoulders just as the brute ran into the cave. After finding something fuzzy with his hand, he poked it with the stick and shouted, "I taste like honey and salmon! I taste like honey and salmon!" There was a massive roar, and pretty soon the ogre was being chased out of the cave by a massive brown bear, through the suburbs, across the rivers, and into the mountains where neither the bear or the ogre were ever heard from again. Before long, word got out to all the weasels about how Larry outsmarted the mustelid-eating ogre. Well, he's the bravest bloody weasel of us all, said a marvelous Martin. He saved a furry bacon, said one overly excitable Stoat. Why, he's the most weasel of us all, an overly authoritative Otter declared. They invited him back to live with him in the forest, where he spent the rest of his days collecting small rocks and just generally being happy to be alive. But he never forgot his brave deed, for he knew even the least weasel could make the biggest difference in the world. Wasn't that a lovely story, kids? Yeah, I didn't think so either. Sorry about that. Well, tune in again soon, and I'll hopefully make up for this by reading a few passages out of Sun Tzu's The Art of Nap Time. Ta-ta until then!